Apparently, most podcasts never make it to 20 episodes, and today is episode number 50 for the Life on Books podcast. So, I guess,
Holy
yeah, I guess people like books still.
and us.
It's hard to believe. So, to celebrate our 50th episode, we're going to do something we've done a handful of times before, which is talk about books and answer questions from other readers. I have a ton of questions. I don't know if you got many.
I think I got like 10 or so.
So let's probably skip our reading update just because I feel like we'll be here forever if we don't just dig into this.
Yeah.
So thanks everyone for the support thus far. We have a Patreon book club where you can join and give us some money to support us. So just super appreciated. The link is down below. But let's just kick it right off here. Get into these questions. We'll start with Instagram, and you and I can just go back and forth.
Sure.
I got a lot of good ones this time. Sometimes they're kind of like people are like, "What's your favorite romance?" I'm like, why do you follow me? I don't understand.
Yeah. Did you do Instagram, TikTok, Patreon, or just?
I just did Instagram and YouTube.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. YouTube has a like a post.
Yeah.
function now that actually like people use. Like when I post to it, I usually get some good responses. So,
all right.
But yeah, we'll just kick it off from the top here. Let's see. Man, people's usernames on social media are so strange. Oh, I get it now. I just need glasses. So Mike Cahoon _ATL, which I assume is for Atlanta, asks, what are your favorite genres? Fantasy, sci-fi, horror, etc. I would say that I am not much of a genre reader unless you want to consider literature a genre. But I guess within literature, I really tend to enjoy things from the 20th century.
Yeah, I think my answer is going to be pretty much the exact same. I don't really think much of what I read like falls neatly into any particular genre.
Yeah.
So it does feel a little bit pretentious to be like, I like literature, but
you like what you like, man.
Yeah, I do tend to gravitate towards, weirder, more obscure, esoteric and or erudite works of fiction. Sometimes encroaching on the avant-garde stuff, but even sometimes with that, like I'll pick something up and I'm just, I do appreciate when there's, a good narrative, something that kind of, draws you in and keeps you invested throughout from cover to cover. And I think sometimes with some of those avant-garde books, you kind of get a writer who's technically very talented, but the book ends up just kind of being them showing off how technically talented they are, whether that's, intentional or not. And those kind of lose me, but it's in the same kind of time period as you, works from the 20th century, particularly post World War II. I would say lately that my tastes have gravitated a little bit more modern than yours have. I do kind of like things that are from later in the 20th century and or the 21st century.
Yeah.
So, but
I think one of my problems with genre fiction in general is that in order for something to be part of that genre, it kind of has to tick certain boxes.
Yeah.
And therefore you kind of know going into it, like what you're going to get, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I think I really like to be surprised. And I think the more kind of original a work can be, the better.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think about like some of the books that I have had like a really profound effect on me, something like a JR or an Infinite Jest. And, I know when we talked about Infinite Jest, like you were talking about how it had elements of science fiction to it, which I, agree with.
you wouldn't be like, check out this sci-fi.
Right.
Like a sci-fi
you go to
reader's not going to love that book.
You don't go to the bookstore and like look for that in the sci-fi section.
Right.
I wouldn't call it a work of science fiction.
Yeah.
I guess, there are works that I like that have kind of pulled from different genres without necessarily falling into one specifically.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. What do you got?
So, sorry, I lost him. I got a question here that I guess will kind of piggyback off of the one you just read. Where'd it go? What's a genre or subgenre that you haven't read enough of or want to read more of? And that is from I Don't Know What I Read on Instagram.
I would probably say Westerns. Is that what you were going to say?
Yes.
Because I think that kind of contradicting myself from 5 seconds ago, even though something might need to be within like these certain rails to be considered in that genre, there's obviously still a lot you can do within any particular genre.
Yeah.
And I think that Westerns have a stigma about them that is probably not always true.
Yeah.
And so obviously you have people that consider something like Lonesome Dove is kind of a classic Western.
Yeah.
But it also has some anti-Western themes. You have Blood Meridian, which is considered a Western, but also kind of not.
You're right.
And then maybe something like Warlock by Oakley Hall.
Warlock, I would definitely call a straight up Western.
Right, but obviously very literary at the
Yes.
same time. So probably Westerns.
I would say the same thing. Obviously read Lonesome Dove and Warlock. I've read Blood Meridian. I've read The Sisters Brothers by Patrick DeWitt. And The Brother from
Rain Road
from Open Letter, which is less of a classic Western than the other four I mentioned, but has a lot of those like spaghetti Western elements.
Yeah, Butcher's Crossing, would you say is a Western?
Oh, yep. That one too. That one I would call a Western, or certainly has a lot of Western elements. So it's not like a genre I tend to like look out for, like if I'm going to the bookstore or something and, head to that section. But it's also one like I've enjoyed pretty much every Western that I've read.
Yeah.
And I think for the most part, like with the exception of, Blood Meridian, which is pretty violent. They're usually fun.
Yeah.
Even if it's not like, there's a lot of, super exuberant. They usually end up being pretty enjoyable.
Yeah.
Stories, and depending on the character can be a little bit more lighthearted, and just kind of a good story. I've always found that like if I finish something that's really long or complex or, just dense in any way, that good Western has always been a solid palate cleanser for me.
Yeah. What gives me pause about a genre like Western genre is it's one of those genres where you do tend to see authors just crank out the books. And I know this isn't always true, but I feel like when you see that happening, you kind of think, okay, is it formulaic? Is it just wham, bam, I'm making a paycheck?
Yeah, they do have the potential to become very campy.
Yeah.
Which, if that's not what you're looking for, like, that sucks.
Yeah, because I don't really read series
Yeah.
in general, and there's a ton of series in Westerns, and
Well, even something like with like Lonesome Dove, because we were obviously talking about how we didn't get as much of the anti-Western vibe from it, and I forget the title of it, but a lot of people recommended one of McMurtry's other books to us that he, it's much more clear what his approaches or what thematically he's trying to get at. And I looked into it, and it was like the 4th book of the Lonesome Dove series.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it's a great book. I liked Lonesome Dove a lot, but I did not like it enough to like invest 3 other books.
Yeah.
Or 2 other books to get to this final one,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, maybe someday we'll become more genre readers. Let's see here. Jack G. King. This one will just be for me. It says Catch-22 is also my favorite book ever. Do you have any similar recommendations? There's not a lot of books that I've experienced that are like Catch-22. I mean, Joseph Heller and Kurt Vonnegut were good buddies and were writing around the same time period and about similar themes. So, I mean, if you haven't read Slaughterhouse-Five, I would definitely check that out. But there's also a book that I read last year called China Dream by Ma Jian, and that I thought the satirical tone of it was extremely similar to Catch-22.
I think, obviously I haven't read Catch-22, but I think if you read that and enjoyed it, probably a lot of the other authors from that time period that he gets, mentioned with.
Yeah.
Gaddis is very satirical. Subject matter and narratives are different. And from the little I've read of Heller, the writing style is different. But if you enjoy the satirical nature, someone like Gaddis,
you probably would like Thomas Pynchon.
yeah, you'd probably
12 minutes in.
And it wasn't even me.
Yep.
Well, I'm free to start dropping Ruggle bombs now. Yeah, Pynchon, maybe some Bartholomew, Coover, any of those other postmodernists.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I talked about this before, but like Heller, Catch-22 predated JR. And then when JR was published, that kind of connection was made a ton. But the recognitions predated Catch-22. And it was, you can kind of make the connection that the recognitions, whether Heller did or didn't read it, kind of influenced that new style that kind of came out of that time period. And it was just kind of funny to like have Gaddis' second book be compared to all of these people that he might have inspired and or influenced.
Right. That is kind of backwards. What do you got for the next question?
Ooh, this will be a fun one. This is also from I Don't Know What I Read. If you were to only read one book for every 2 months, what one would you start with? So you have to spend 2 months with a book. That's the only book you can read for those 2 months.
Gotcha. I mean, that's a fairly easy question in the sense that I'm probably just going to pick longer books.
Yeah.
So Europe Central by Vollman, that's on my list to read. I want to read Marshland by Otohiko Kaga. That's a long one. At some point, I want to reread Moby Dick.
Yeah.
So I'll keep it there with those 3. It's probably my top 3 picks.
Yeah. I would probably pick longer works as well. I haven't read Moby Dick. That would be at top of my list for that. I've read Infinite Jest, but maybe like Pale King by Wallace. I don't know. I might go back and reread some stuff. Spend some more time with Borges or some of, like Lispector's collected stories, or, McCroll novellas. There's a lot.
Yeah. Long books for sure though, because I mean, typically I'll read a book in about a week, and then we have the book club books that I stretch out over the whole month.
Yeah.
So there's not a whole lot of books that I'm taking more than a month to read unless they're over probably 600 pages.
Yeah, unless they're long or unless I get distracted by another book that I really like.
Yeah.
As is evidenced by how long it took me to read The Tunnel.
Right. Roberto Padilla, sorry if I'm saying that wrong on Instagram, asks, in your opinion, what contemporary books will be considered classics in 100 years?
So what do you think? Contemporary the last 25 years or like?
Well, let's just call it from the 2000s
21st
on.
century.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I haven't read it, but just the way people talk about it, like I could see something like Solenoid.
Yep. I could see Solenoid lasting. Some of Levin's work. I've only read the instructions, but I've heard a lot of great things about his other works too.
Yeah.
Pynchon's had a few books out in the last 25 years.
Yep.
I think of the 3 that he's had out since the turn of the century, Against the Day is probably the best. The Pale King. I mean, Wallace has had that. That was in the 21st century. Oblivion was in the 21st century. There was another book. I haven't read it yet, but it's The Deluge by Stephen Markley. It's like 900 pages. It's about climate change, more or less. Fiction. I've heard nothing but good things about that. I think works that have themes that are like relevant to current issues in society will kind of have a longer shelf life. I mean, you think about it. 5 minutes ago we were talking about Catch-22, and that's kind of a classic.
Yeah.
That's all about World War II or war in general.
Yeah.
Same thing with Slaughterhouse-Five. And unfortunately, it doesn't seem like war is going away anytime soon.
Nope.
So those themes will have, or excuse me, those books will have characteristics that will remain relevant.
Yeah.
I don't mean to bash something like Fourth Wing or any of these other kind of romantasy type books that are kind of the thing right now, but
I mean, people are already done talking about them.
Right.
And they came out 2 years ago.
Right.
Yeah.
A year from now, some other author is going to have a new one out.
Yeah.
That's kind of going to, take the shine, and
yeah,
that's just going to kind of like rinse and repeat. They might be good stories for the people that enjoy them. But I don't know if there's much beyond that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
because it's me and I love to go on a good tangent. Speaking of war not going away anytime soon, I was having lunch with a friend the other day, and she told me that she's getting into doomsday prepping, and she has some friends in the community, I guess, and their big concern is like an attack from Russia or from China. And I laughed, and she was like, what's so funny about that? And I said, well, Russia's been at war with Ukraine for a few years now, and they can't even beat them. So the likelihood of Russia attacking us seems pretty small.
yeah.
And not to mention, like, just generally, their GDP is like 1/20th the size of ours.
Yeah.
And it seems like our current president's pretty fond of their president. So that just seems unlikely to me.
It also seems like, and this is getting way off track, and
Love that. Hey, it's our 50th episode.
Right.
We can do whatever we want.
and very speculative, but it also seems like there would probably be a lot of major events that would take place before like a physical attack
Yeah.
on American soil.
Yeah.
I mean, the way conflict is conducted
Yeah.
has changed so much.
Well, there's really only been 2 attacks on American soil. You have Pearl Harbor and you have 9/11.
Yeah.
And 9/11 wasn't even really like a military.
I was going to say only one of those was an actual act of war.
Right. there might be some others, but nothing's coming to mind. But and then she was like, well, what about China? And I said, well, I don't know specifically, but I feel like if you look at our track record versus China in terms of attacking other countries, like it's not even close.
Yeah.
You know, like we've done way worse.
If you want my opinion on that, China is not going to attack the U.S. They're going to sit on their heels and watch the current president
Just watch us.
totally annihilate the global dominance that the U.S. has established over the last century.
Yeah.
And when that's wiped out, they're going to step up,
Right.
and they're gonna take over the humanitarian efforts that the U.S. has been involved in. They're going to be the new economic superpower.
Yeah.
They don't have to attack the U.S. if they don't want to.
That's exactly what I said. When you look at like, I don't know if you're familiar with BRICS. It's so it's, what is that? Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, I think is the S.
Oh, I thought the S was like a lowercase, like
Oh, it could be. I don't know. But anyway, you know, there's that kind of economic game that's being played. But so at the long point of the story is I went and looked it up. China has one official military base.
It is South Africa.
It is,
You
yeah.
were right.
China has one official military base outside of Chinese soil. They have like a dozen or so, like kind of unofficial ones. But the U.S. has 750 military bases in over 80 countries, which I don't know what that breaks down to per country, but it's more than one.
Right.
So that's crazy. And I was like, you can't really take that seriously, like the fear of an attack.
That's the other thing, and we should probably wrap this up and move on to some questions soon. But that's the other thing.
I mean, I can recommend books about where I'm getting these ideas from.
But considering the just enormous quantity of U.S. military bases worldwide, I also feel like it would probably be more likely that a physical conflict would start with, you know, pick a country,
Yeah.
attacking a military base
Right.
on foreign soil before attacking the U.S.
Yeah, like the things you would prep for a doomsday scenario, living, especially in the lower 48. It's so not feasible to me. There's other things that could cause you to need food, shelter, water, firearms,
Yeah.
like civil war.
Yeah.
But or just a collapse of our infrastructure in some way. But anyway, getting back to books, that was a fun tangent. That's
Yeah.
what we do here sometimes. We
That was
are
a super fun tangent.
we are two white dudes, so we do need to live up to our stereotype of
knowing everything.
podcasting equipment being too cheap, and not everyone should have it.
Two more white guys with a podcast.
Most disappointing novel you've read recently?
Hmm.
And that comes from the Indie Reader on Instagram. I feel like I need to tighten the legs on this table.
Do you have an answer for that?
The most disappointing novel that I've read recently, yes, and I'm not finished with it, but Something Happened by Joseph Heller. And this comes with a little bit of context. It's not bad.
Mm-hmm.
I just think that my expectations for it were too high. And I'm combining that with the fact that it, as I've mentioned many times before, it's so similar in tone and theme to The Tunnel.
Yeah.
It was not the right time for me to start reading it. So I'm not enjoying it as much as I probably would have if my mindset had been a little bit different. And because Catch-22 is my favorite book, I just had such high expectations for it. And it's so, and I knew this was the case, but it's so different from Catch-22.
Yeah.
So it's not a bad book. It's just disappointing for the level of expectation I set for it.
Yeah. I've got two. One would be The Last Samurai by Helen DeWitt,
Mm-hmm.
which I don't really think I need to get into because we just did a whole episode about it.
Yep.
But unfortunately, I was let down by that.
Mm-hmm.
And my next one would be The Stronghold by Dino Buzzati.
Oh, yeah. Bummer.
Which was...
Because I hyped that a lot.
You hyped that up a lot, and I
Yeah.
think we discussed that it's probably a translation
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
But, you know, typically you know, if one of the two of us like really enjoys a book, the other one will at least like it.
Yeah.
Like even if our enjoyment is at the same level, like you really liked it.
I loved it. Yeah.
I will like it.
Yeah.
I am head over heels about it. You will like it.
And for anyone that doesn't know, the translation that I read goes by the title The Tartar Steppe.
So you were over the moon about it.
Yeah.
And it sounded like it was going to be a really enjoyable read for me. And it just, I was so bored with it.
Yeah. It happens.
So that was a disappointment. Those would be my two.
Cool. All right. What do you got next for a question?
All right. This one, I think you will do a better job of answering than I will, because in general, I think you are a little bit more curious than I am, or at least you do a little bit more with that curiosity than I do. But
Okay.
a book that made you curious about a topic and made you buy a bunch of books on said topic. And that was from Hennessy.
Well, not necessarily a book that kicked it all off, but I did go through a pretty big North Korean phase.
Yep.
Which was precipitated by two things. Number one was the movie The Interview with Seth Rogen and James Franco. There's a lot, if you don't recall, it came out in 2014. There was a lot of controversy about it. So it's a comedy, obviously. Have you seen it?
Of course.
Okay. It's about these two journalists that go to North Korea to interview Kim Jong-un. And when it came out that this movie was going to be in the theaters, North Korea got pissed.
Yeah.
And they started threatening all kinds of stuff. And eventually the company that produced it, I forget who it was, which studio it was, but they ended up chickening out of putting it in theaters, and they just released it on YouTube and streaming. And so
that's right. I was just, for a second I thought I saw it in the theater, but no, you're right.
No, I watched it on. I remember it was like the first movie I bought on YouTube. It was like $5, and it's hilarious. It's so funny. So I was kind of already like interested in North Korea, and then because of that, because I was like, wow, that's so weird. You know, like how much of this movie is true? What is it really like that in North Korea? And then you've heard this story a million times, so I apologize. But for our listeners, I went to the weightlifting world championships in 2015, which were held in Houston, Texas. And I'll drop the photos in to the edit of me and some North Koreans chilling because North Korea is actually pretty good at weightlifting, particularly in the lighter weight classes and women's classes. And it just occurred to me, like, yeah, I'm never going to see a North Korean ever again in my life because they're not really allowed out of the country, except for this type of thing. And they were pretty much chaperoned the whole time. There was a dude in a suit and tie that just followed them around everywhere they went. What's crazy about that is I think it was the Colombian weightlifting team or maybe the Cuban weightlifting team. A bunch of them defected from the country at that tournament. They just never got on their flight home and they just pieced out. Yeah. But anyway, when I got home from that trip, I was like full on North Korea and I bought like 10 books about it and I read quite a few of them. So I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Does anything come to mind for you?
It's sort of, my thing is, if I read a book that I'm, especially fiction, that like really captivates me, less often am I searching out books, nonfiction that are about whatever topic was covered in that original work of fiction. And more often than not, I'm like looking up other books that are similar to it. So it's kind of hard for me to answer that because like I've said this a number of times, like a lot of my favorite books and authors have come from trying to figure out what the hell I read when I read Gravity's Rainbow.
Yeah.
And I just kind of looked up like more books like Gravity's Rainbow. And it kind of just led me down this rabbit hole. it's led me to look into like other things, maybe listen to like a podcast here or there about, something like Operation Paperclip, which was a kind of a central theme of Gravity's Rainbow. And I know there's a book about it, and I've almost purged it a handful of times. I've a book about the JFK assassination. I've got a book about Allen Dulles and the CIA, some things like that. But I'm much more inclined to just search out other books, like the one that I just read. So I just get so much more enjoyment out of reading fiction.
Yeah,
that I'd kind of rather continue the rabbit hole or widen the net versus like tunnel deeper and deeper down on a specific singular topic. So
yeah, the only other thing that comes to mind for me is I read is it The Lost City of the Monkey God by Douglas Preston? I think I probably got some of that wrong, but it's about some researchers and scientists that find like a forgotten city in South America. And there's a mention in that book about the United Fruit Company and their like Banana Republic and all the terrible things that they did in Central and South America. And then right after I read that, I read 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, which also references that. I mean, it's fictionalized in the book. And so there's a book about the founder of the United Fruit Company. It's called The Fish That Swallowed the Whale, I think.
That sounds right.
And I bought that, but I haven't read it yet. But just go read the Wikipedia page on that company. It will blow your mind.
Yeah.
And kind of going back to what we were talking about before, with the U.S. being the provocateur of, these conflicts.
The bad guys, if you will.
Yeah, the bad guys, if you will. I mean, we literally were like, hey, this country's government is not letting this American company do business the way they want to anymore, so we're going to take them out with the CIA. Like, what are we doing, guys?
Yeah.
And the United Fruit Company became, I want to say it became Chiquita
That
Banana.
sounds right.
And they're like still doing stuff like that. Like there was a lawsuit in like 2017 with them like funding some violent militia or something. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
How is this real, guys? So, yeah. Sometimes, books can be chained together like that. Hennessy on Instagram asks, have you followed your reading list so far? So this year I did a 25 for 25 list, which I don't think I've really done in the past couple years, but so far I've read 2 books on that list, which I think is not bad. So
That's pretty good. Yeah.
What about you? Are you sticking to your reading list? Because you did a 25 for 25 as well.
I did. I am actively reading one of the books on my list, 2666. But that's about as far as it's gone.
How far into that are you?
I'm about a third of the way in.
Are you liking it?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. It's got a slightly different vibe than the Savage Detectives. It's a little bit more morose. Obviously we talked about this when we did the episode, but Bolaño kind of said that the Savage Detectives was a love letter to his generation.
Yeah.
So there was a little bit, a little bit more, even at its moments where it's kind of, sad. It is kind of have that romantic nostalgia to it. And I don't remember, it was obviously published posthumously, but I don't remember if this was something that was like in Bolaño's notes or if it was just someone I heard like use as a descriptor to talk about it. But something I heard attached to 2666 was that it's a post-mortem for the past, present, and future.
Oh, geez. Okay.
So
meta.
It's a little bit, like I said, a little bit more morose and kind of not, I wouldn't say depressing, but depressed.
Okay.
So
Cool. You have any more questions? You have a few more, right?
yeah, where'd they go? All right. Sell someone on reading your favorite author with one sentence. And that comes from Just Call Me Belly.
Oh yeah, our buddy Mike, who's in our book club.
Oh, it's Mike.
Yep. Sell someone on my favorite author. Well, I guess I have to decide who my favorite author is, who I guess I would probably say is John Steinbeck. Just because I've read more books from Steinbeck than probably any other author, and I've liked every single one of them. One sentence. Jeez, man. This is tough. We're just dumb podcasters. We're not fucking poets.
You want me to go or you?
Sure. Why
Okay.
don't you take it away?
Incredible prose and writing with lots of slapstick humor, neurotic paranoia, and lots of dick jokes.
Sold. I'll go with the most important and influential writer of the 20th century. I think that's a fair claim.
It's a little bit more reverent than mine.
I don't know. That was a good one, though. Well, we'll go to Mike's question next. He left one for me as well. Are hot dog sandwiches? No.
Hot dogs
Yeah.
are technically tacos.
I think that's legit. Yeah.
So,
Because they're open face.
so someone directed me to this because back when you and I were still at the gym and we had the question of the day thing on the whiteboard there, I asked that once. I think I actually did as a hamburger, a sandwich. And someone sent me a link to this. I forget the website, but it basically was kind of, it's a goof, but it was like a mathematical breakdown of what does and doesn't constitute a sandwich. And the theory behind it was how many sides of the meat are covered by bread. So if there's, bread on top and the bottom, it's a sandwich. And if it's, left, bottom, right, it's a taco.
That makes sense.
And so your hot dog is a taco, but no, it's not a sandwich.
Yeah, I'm on board with that. This comes from Andy BDQ. If one deceased author could come back to life to write one more book, who would you choose and why?
Wallace.
All right, there you go. David Foster Wallace.
I think, and I mean, obviously I was very confident with my answer, and I've talked about this before, but I'll add some context. I said this or one of us said it when we were talking about Infinite Jest, but he was just so prescient and had his finger on the pulse.
Yeah, it would be amazing to see what he would think about what's going on right now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, how much stuff, Infinite Jest came out in the late 90s, and how much stuff did that more or less predict with a startling amount of accuracy.
Well, I
mean, you look at what was going on in that with the
ONAN
and subsidized time. And there's terrible speculation that there's going to be an attempt to make Canada the 51st state.
Yeah.
There was a bill introduced that would give Trump the authority to negotiate a purchase of Greenland and rename it Red, White, and Blue Land.
Which is the dumbest thing.
It's
so stupid.
Hilarious. How are we a real country?
We're not.
But
We're definitely
maybe not the full state of the world, and I've said this on the podcast, I've said it off the air to you, to people that don't give a shit about David Foster Wallace. I would absolutely love to read a 100-page essay from David Foster Wallace on the cultural spectacle that is a Taylor Swift concert.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was a genius.
You go and read, I forget the title of it. But, there was one of the pieces in A Supposedly Fun Thing I'll Never Do Again was a write-up he did. He went to I want to say it was the Illinois State Fair. It was a state fair from some, I think, Midwestern state. And it was just hilarious. And it was, full of, little funny, clever observations, but it was also like, it was heartfelt. He wasn't like, punching down.
Right.
But just to see him write about something that, because state fairs aren't really what they used to be, at least not in the Northeast, but just, it'd be so fun to like see him write about something, a more modern cultural piece.
Yeah. 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 I'm going to go with that as well. Probably Wallace. So, what do you got for another question?
Okay. Well, I've got one that if we try to answer today, I will be here all afternoon and I'll get snowed in. Because someone asked us our top 10 books of all time.
Oh, somebody else asked me if we have a top 10 list anywhere. Not 10, but we've done our top 5 on a podcast episode. So I will, if I remember, I'll put that in the links on the show notes.
I was thinking about that when I read this question. We should maybe update that at some point in the future. But
yeah,
I also don't think my top 5 has really changed all that much.
Yeah.
So this is another one from Hennessy. What is your favorite read of the year so far?
The Invisibility Cloak by Goffey. That short novella from NYRB.
Yeah. I would probably say Amulet by Roberto Bolaño.
I'm not surprised. I think like at least half of what you've read this year has been Bolaño.
Yes. Yes.
So, running a 50% run rate there. Flippin' Pages 10 says, do you have any advice to help the less experienced in understanding and translating imagery in literature? No, not really. I mean, the thing about difficult works is that if you, I don't want to discourage anybody from stopping and looking things up or reading references or using a guide. However, we've talked about this before. Sometimes people get a little bit too hung up on that stuff.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just have to read it and keep reading and pushing through and accept the fact that not everything is always going to make sense to you.
Yeah.
And what I've found really with the book club discussions, both in like the chats on Discord and like the live calls that we do, is that a lot of times things that didn't make sense to me also didn't make sense to everyone else. And so it's like, maybe it's just not for us to necessarily know.
Right.
So yeah,
I think to some degree, depending on the book you're reading, there isn't necessarily a wrong answer. Right. Your personal interpretation and your engagement of the book is enough.
Yeah.
If you flat out don't understand anything, that's different. But if you like take something away, I don't necessarily think that's wrong. I would say, try to take notes if you can. I mean, obviously, if something comes up in if you're reading a 400-page book, if something comes up in the first 50 pages, it might not seem, you might not know if it's like an important image or symbol. But if you start to see something similar, like popping up,
yeah,
make note of that. Annotate your book, underline, bracket, highlight, whatever you got to do. Take some notes.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing I would recommend, I've talked about this before as kind of advice for anyone that wants to get into reading more difficult books, but, kind of pick things where there's more of a discourse readily available, whether that is, guidebooks or reference books or some kind of formal analysis, or you just pick something where, maybe there's a fairly active subreddit based around the book or the author. But if you go and read something like Crime and Punishment, right, you can find tons
Yeah.
of people talking about that.
That book's been analyzed to death. Yeah.
Right. And so, maybe you read a section you don't understand, or maybe you read the whole book and you have, some semblance of an idea of what it all really means, right?
Yeah.
And then you go up and you go and you look up some analysis of it, whether it's, again, the book at whole or a specific passage. And, maybe there's a dozen people online that all say the same thing or something similar about this passage, right? And you read all of what they have to say, and then go back and reread the passage,
Yeah.
and see if things kind of opened up for you.
Yeah.
I think it's, to some degree, it's kind of a skill that you just have to develop with time.
Yeah, I've found that when I've read challenging books and maybe felt like this is over my head, later on down the road, I'll read something that's also supposedly a challenging book, and I'm like, this actually isn't bad. Like, I've built that muscle up.
Right.
It's kind of how I felt about The Tunnel. Not to say I thought it was an easy read, but that book gave me a little anxiety. Like, oh man, everyone talks about how hard it is. And I started reading it, and I was like, no, I think I'm getting most of this. So.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's just, you have to just read and develop some mental acuity.
Yeah.
And it to hear that, it can be kind of discouraging, because I think, I'm the same way. Like, everyone wants to understand what they're reading. You have to just kind of find a way to be okay with not understanding everything.
Yeah.
I've talked about this a number of times, because people have asked, both through Q&As on the pod or in the discussion forums we have, or just like messaging me on Instagram, like stuff they should read before reading Gravity's Rainbow.
Mm-hmm.
And, outside of the first two Pynchon novels that preceded it, I don't think you really should read anything.
Yeah.
Because if you try to read everything that will give you insight into what Pynchon was talking about, you'll never have the time to read Gravity's Rainbow.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit reductive, but part of the book is not understanding everything.
Yeah.
That's kind of the point is the modern world that these technocratic cartels have created. It's impossible to understand everything.
Right.
And that anxiety and neurosis that you experience trying to understand everything that is going on in this crazy fucked up world is a sensation you should feel while you read that book.
Right. It's just as much about the way it makes you feel rather than what it's actually saying.
Exactly.
Yeah. What do you got for your next question?
I'm pretty much out.
Okay. Hennessy, asking lots of great questions today. Reading projects you were in the middle of. What are they? Reading a book from every country in the world. Definitely taking my time with that.
Yep.
For the most part, and Vietnam, my Vietnam project, which I've had to take a little bit of a break from because it was just depressing the hell out of me.
Yeah.
What about you?
I mean, my current short-term one is, Bolaño. It kind of was like working my way up to 2666.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a few, 2 or 3 short story collections of his that I haven't read yet. I have a collection of like essays and articles and transcripts, of speeches he's given. And then a couple of other novels that I haven't read or would like to reread. I don't know if, when I finish 2666, if I'll, just keep plugging away at those. My kind of plan after finishing The Savage Detectives was to just read a few more of his shorter works and work my way up to 2666.
Mm-hmm.
My interest in him and an author has not decreased at all.
Nice.
It's stayed about the same. So You know, I'll get around to all that stuff in the future, but I don't, you know, the goal of the project was to work my way up to 2666.
Yeah.
Other than that, I don't really have any crazy ones other than just trying to read books off my shelf.
Yeah.
You know, I've done a pretty good job so far this year, not buying any books. I mean, I went to the bookstore on my birthday, but
Yeah.
those don't count.
The only books I've purchased so far this year, and the only books I've purchased really since November, is the University of Chicago Press had a sale, and I picked up a few books from there.
Yep.
So
in fact, it's been at least 6 weeks now. In that time, I've only ordered one book online.
Nice.
And that was for the book club. So again, that doesn't count.
Yeah, it doesn't count.
So, and I bought it through the bookshop affiliate link to support the podcast.
Oh,
so
very nice.
It counts even less than not counting.
Yeah, it's great when we get those 50-cent commissions.
Yeah. No, I don't really have any like serious projects.
Mm-hmm.
Like I just kind of just want to keep reading.
Yeah.
And, you know, without feeling like pigeonholed into any specific thing. You know, obviously your read the world thing is very admirable. And I, you know, have spoken about my affinity for works in translation.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a part of me that also feels like if I set out to do that goal, I don't want to say it would feel like I was just like checking off boxes, but it to me, like if I try to do that sometimes, like it starts to feel like I'm doing something more as like a project, and it takes some of the enjoyment out of it, you know?
Yeah.
Like I know someone on Instagram who all of 2024 only read books written by women.
Yeah. Yep.
And
that was who was that?
Kyle Poland.
That's right.
Again, I don't mean to diminish that. It's very admirable. You know, we joke about the comments that we get from people saying we don't read enough books by women.
Mm-hmm.
And I've joked about how I don't care, but I will also tell you that even though have read and enjoyed books by women, and I should read more books by women, the overall majority of books I've read have been written by men.
Yeah.
But there's also a part of me that, like, if I set out to do that, I would just be like, you know, finish something by Sylvia Plath, and then the next book on my women I should read is something by Virginia Woolf. But then I'm sitting there in my chair looking at my shelf, and there's Gerald Murnane, and I really want to, you know, like,
yeah,
I just kind of
You're a mood reader.
Right. I kind of just want to follow the squirrels in my brain, like I've said before, you know?
Yeah,
So
definitely. I'm going to go to YouTube for a moment here. My name is Elsa. I'm from Finland. Do you guys listen to metal? If so, what are your favorite bands and subgenres? If you don't listen to metal, can you tell about your favorite bands or music taste overall? Been a fan for half a year or so. I've almost caught up with every podcast episode. Love to listen to your stuff and the discussions. Keep up the great work. Cheers. Thank you, Elsa. That's a very kind message. Feels apropos for someone from Finland to be asking about metal, because I think they have a pretty, Scandinavia in general is pretty heavy in the metal scene. I don't know if you listen to much metal.
don't.
But I am a huge metalhead.
You are, yeah.
So, I mean, you want to talk like classics? Napalm Death is probably my all-time favorite straight-up metal band. Really big fan of old Slayer stuff. Pantera, but the racism isn't great. Rage Against the Machine, if you want to call that metal. I know that's more like rap metal or new metal. I did have a new metal phase because I was a kid in the 90s, so Korn, Limp Bizkit, all those not so actually talented bands, in my opinion now, looking back. But I also love some more modern stuff. I love deathcore. I love fantasy metal. So like Blind Guardian, Holy Grail. For newer stuff, there's a band that I've been listening to called Snuffed on Sight, and they have a great song called Blunt Cough.
What a name.
Yep.
What a name.
Yep. It's like this is the most gross metal.
No,
Yeah.
I'm shocked.
I was a big metalcore fan, so As It Lay Dying, but the whole him trying to hire a hitman to kill his wife wasn't great. Misery Signals, Shai Hulud, yeah, lots of metal bands. I really, there's not too much metal I don't like.
Okay.
But I also listen to a lot of other genres. So we in our Discord for the book club, we have a chat for music, and I actually was just saying this morning because multiple people have kind of commented how many bands I'm familiar with and how many artists I'm familiar with. I said, when you ask people what they like, a lot of people say, "Oh, I like everything," and that usually just means like they listen to the radio.
Yeah.
I actually mean it when I say it.
Yeah.
Like, I like everything. I like classical. I like country, mostly like real country, not like the modern pop BS.
Right.
I like hip hop. I like jazz. I mean, I haven't really encountered a genre of music that I've just, on the whole, been like, ew, no.
Yeah. I don't really like everything, but I'm really great at tuning out stuff I don't like. Because I joked about this, probably have joked about it with you before, but like, working at a gym,
Yeah.
there's, even when we were at Architect and like had direct control over the music that was being played, you still have to play stuff that the members are going to like.
Yeah. And you have to come up with something for 8 hours.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's not a lot of stuff that 8 hours worth of members enjoy that are like my cup of tea.
Yeah.
So it ends up just kind of becoming background noise.
Definitely,
to me.
yeah, yeah.
Like there's some stuff that I like, I'm just like, no, I don't want to listen to that. Turn it off.
Yeah.
But like most of the time, if it's something I don't like, it's in one ear and out the other, and it's background noise.
If I had to guess, you're mostly like a hip hop and like pop punk kind of guy, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
I've been listening to a lot of Big X, The Plug lately.
Dude, I had him on straight this morning. Nothing but he's the man.
I've been listening to a lot of him, a lot of Key Glock,
I don't know
and
who that is.
Young Dolph.
Don't know who that is.
They're out of I think Young Dolph is actually dead.
Oh, R.I.P. Young Dolph, I guess.
Those two guys are from Memphis.
Yeah. Yeah, Big X the Plug is good. I'm definitely like getting into that age where I find myself only listening to stuff that I already like.
Yeah.
I don't discover as many new artists.
Yeah. Freddie Gibbs. He's one of my
That
favorites.
sounds familiar,
Yeah.
but I don't know if I would recognize it.
He's a rapper. He's out of Gary, Indiana.
Okay.
His most recent album, which I cannot remember the name of for the life of me, was one of my favorites from 2024.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, Big X the Plug, that song, I think it's just called Texas, is great.
Yeah.
2 a.m.
yeah,
That's a good one.
the largest level.
The Largest is good too. Yeah. He starts every song the same way. He's always like, hey.
Oh, they all sound the
hey.
same.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I love them.
Yeah, no, they're all good. Although there is some newer music that I've been getting into. There's people still doing creative stuff. Like I just discovered this group called Petey.
Okay.
They're kind of like pop punk elements, but like there's a lot of like 8-bit synth type sounds.
Okay.
So it's a little indie-ish in that way.
Yep.
But yeah, lots of stuff. Also, I'd be curious to know obviously you must like metal if you're asking us that question. So
Young Thug is still my favorite.
Young Thug,
Recently out of jail.
Oh, congrats.
Shout out, Free Slime.
I love that.
That was maybe the best day of my life.
That Young Thug got out of jail?
Yeah. That was a huge day for me.
Okay. What day was that? Was that recently?
It was, I don't remember if it was the end of the year or
Did Biden pardon him? Or?
No, he took a plea deal.
Oh, so he's a snitch.
No, don't start that. No.
Okay, so OX Dubs on YouTube asks, can you talk about rereading? How important do you think it is to revisit works if you've read other things? Which books have you read more than once or want to read again? And how did your reading experience change on the reread? Did you interpret or judge the work differently? And congrats on the 50th. Thank you. I think rereading is great, although I don't do much of it, unfortunately.
I was going to say the same thing. I think it's a super important and valuable thing to do that I have not done nearly enough of.
Yeah, that's probably a weak area for me. And part of that's just there's just so many books out there that you want to read.
Right.
I definitely need to reread Catch-22 soon.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to reread Moby Dick. I would probably like to reread the brothers Karamazov.
Karamazov.
Because I didn't finish it and I didn't like it. I got about halfway through.
Yeah, I got 300 pages in when I read it. And
yeah.
I've talked about this before. I loved Crime and Punishment.
Yeah.
Like I couldn't put it down. And I was so excited to read Brothers K because, I think depending on who you talk to, like a lot of people rank that higher.
Mm-hmm.
Or say it has, more depth to it than Crime and Punishment. And I was just so bored.
Yeah, I thought it was quite boring.
I was just like, I got like 300 pages in and I was like, when does this get interesting?
Yeah.
And I had a few people kind of tell me like, just, at least read to the Grand Inquisitor section. And I finished that and I was like, okay, who cares?
Speaking of the Grand Inquisitor, there's a great metal band called The Ocean, and they have a song called The Grand Inquisitor.
Okay.
And a lot of their lyrics on a few of their albums reference literature, which is pretty cool. Yeah. And they're really interesting. So their album Heliocentric combines metal and like classical instruments and piano, and it's one of the best.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's good. Count of Monte Cristo, I think I'd like to reread.
Yep.
You're reading that right now, right?
I am. Yep.
And you're enjoying it?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. I'm about 200 pages in.
A little surprising to me, but all right. I'm glad you're liking it.
Yeah. I think I talked about this. It kind of popped up in my head when you included it in a reel you posted recently.
Yeah.
And I think I was just kind of looking for something that is a little bit more of a straightforward narrative, more or less.
Yeah.
Not to say that that's just like a storybook, but
it is and it isn't. Yeah.
Compared to a lot of the stuff I've been reading recently, it is more of just a good story. And I'm all about vengeance.
Yeah.
So, absolutely. To answer the other half of that question, there's a handful of books that I've reread. Surprisingly, not many of them that my reading experience improved. That's not to say like I liked them any less on the second read through, but most of them I liked them about the same. I didn't feel like I got as much out of them. Or excuse me, got more out of them.
Right.
I think part of that is just, it's fun when things are fresh. I talked about this, and I don't remember if it was on the air or just chatting with you, but like when I was reading The Tunnel, I still loved it. I still thought it was a masterpiece.
Yeah.
But, when we started reading that the tail end of last year, it was only about a year removed from my first read of it.
Yeah, maybe not long enough.
Yeah, so like it didn't have the same like, holy hell, this is, like it didn't just
for
floor
me
me the way it did.
I think a reread needs to be to the point where the details have become pretty fuzzy to you.
Yeah,
because then you can kind of experience it again for the first time in a way.
Yeah.
So,
I think too, like, and granted. If you're reading something that's like narrative based, I think it's good to have some time between. So like, smaller details of the narrative aren't as familiar to you. But also like one of the few books that I got more out of on the second read was Gravity's Rainbow.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a big part of that was between the first read and the second read, like I grew a lot as a reader, but I also invested a lot of time into learning more specifically about that book and Thomas Pynchon.
Yeah.
So I had like some extra insight going into it, which I've read multiple works by William Gaddis, but outside of a couple of articles here or there, haven't done as much research, so to speak, into him and his work.
Yeah.
So,
Glossy 1068 says, congrats. Do you follow any literature prizes? If so, which are your favorites? And who are your favorite bookish content creators? I don't think either of us really follow any prizes. I mean, there's definitely people, like somebody commented on the reel I posted this morning and say that they are reading every single Pulitzer Prize winner for fiction since it started, which I think is like over 100 years ago.
that's crazy.
Which is cool. And you and I have talked about this before, like, oh, if somebody wins the Nobel Prize or wins the Pulitzer, yeah, maybe I'll give it some extra consideration and it'll pique my interest and I'll learn a little bit more about the book or the author. But I don't strictly, I'm like, ooh, I have to read it because it won the Nobel or whatever.
No, I'm the same way. I don't really care for awards, with the exception of authors that we've had on the podcast that are nominated and or awarded awards.
Yeah. And then who are your favorite content creators that make content about books other than ourselves?
Yeah. I got to be honest, like there's not a ton of people that I follow that I feel like are content creators.
Sure. Yeah.
Like I mostly follow people that just post about books.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, maybe some reviews here and there and like a longer form caption. But I don't really follow a ton of people that are like cranking out reels and short form, like specifically making content to the extent that you do. But Leaf by Leaf Official is great. I mean, he's mostly doing the YouTube stuff. His videos are awesome.
Yep.
One of these days I'll find time to watch any of them.
Yeah, they're usually quite long. And in depth.
Chris, you're killing me. Can we cut it back to like half an hour, please? I mean, Seth at Waste Mailing List.
Yeah,
he's getting a little bit more into the short form game.
Yep.
He's not. It's been a while since he's posted anything on YouTube.
Yeah.
I have a feeling with the forthcoming publication of Schadenfreude, that'll change. But I mean, that's months away. Yeah, I don't really follow specific content creators, but I mean, you know, Jonathan Golding Books, I think is his username. He posts a lot of good reviews. I got to shout out Kevin, DHV Book Nerd. He's great. I mean, you think of some people. I'm just going to open up my feed and just scroll through the names.
I mean, ironically, I'm not the best person to ask because I just don't use social media like a user that much.
Yeah, I that too. I've just been so inactive.
Yeah,
like I don't post as much as I used to.
I mean, I'm just making.
I don't look at it as much as I used to.
Yeah, I'm on it so much to post and to respond to comments and all that stuff that you get burnt out and it doesn't leave a lot of time for like actually just sitting back and watching content.
Yeah.
And so when I do, and the other thing too is like I make so much content about books. I don't like consume a lot of content about books. So usually if I'm on social media to watch something or listen to something, it's either music related, so like guitar stuff specifically because I play guitar, or motorcycle stuff. But with that said, I mean, I have become pretty good friends with Nick at Books Are Sick and CJ at CJ Talks Books and Michael Kiss at Kiss Reads Books because there aren't a lot of dudes making videos like the way that we do.
Yeah.
And if you look at our like what we read across the four of us, I'd say it's all fairly dissimilar from one another. There's a little bit of overlap.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, like none of us are like strict fantasy or sci-fi readers. And so I think the four of us are kind of like some of the only guys that I've come across that are really like making reviews in a certain way and not necessarily sticking to strict genres or styles. But like, I don't think any of us really like in-depth watch a lot of what we post.
No,
you know what I mean?
I
Like,
just did a quick scroll to see if, there were any other people that I followed that, popped up right away so I could shout them out. And my algorithm fed me a bunch of leftist meme pages. So
there you go.
that should show you the state of where my social media use is at.
I mean, if you go on to my Instagram, I follow, I think, less than 500 people. And most of them are going to be because, like, at some point they posted a review of a book that I have read or would read.
Yeah.
And so just look at that list.
I mean, I wouldn't really call him a content creator, but if you're listening, you should probably follow Rick Harsh.
Yeah.
And coronasamas.books.
Yeah.
And Rick, there's your shout out. Send me that damn hat. I love you, Rick.
Rick is the man.
Rick is the man, and coronasamas.books are awesome, and you should buy them.
We're not getting paid to say that, by the way.
No. But Rick, if you want to pay us, you can pay us, or you can just send me the damn hat.
This is a long one from Connor Cudmore 7530. Two-part question. Firstly, with the world now heavily favoring fast content, 10-second videos, dopamine farming content, etc., it's becoming increasingly harder to recommend books and discuss reading with a wider community. Reading has gone from something more broadly welcomed by the everyman to something that is done only by the reading community, which is sad. Do you guys have any thoughts about how to engage non-readers in a way that makes reading fun and accessible for people who currently have no interest in books? Sometimes I feel like non-readers see readers as having a superiority complex. We do, which makes, and it's deserved, complex, which makes it harder to make them see the benefits of reading books because they may feel like there's a high barrier to entry. Secondly, favorite conspiracy theory that you believe has the potential to be true. Thanks, big fan from London, UK. Wow, two very different questions there.
Yeah.
First, I will say I don't know of any specific techniques to get non-readers to become readers. What I will say is that is one of my hopes and goals for every single piece of content I make, more or less.
Yeah.
I think that just getting excited about books and talking about books and letting people see that you're excited about them is a really important way to do that. Like, a great example is a couple months ago, we were out to dinner with some friends. One of them's an attorney and obviously a highly educated person, but someone like an attorney, he reads all day for work.
Right.
So probably not high on his priority list when he gets home. But I had just finished reading Endurance by Alfred Lansing, which is like a wild book and an easy to read book and a fun book. And I was just like hyped on it. And so we talked about it at dinner. And then he went to the library, checked it out, and read it, and he loved it. And now he's like, what other book should I read?
Yeah.
So it can be as simple as that. It doesn't have to be.
I don't think it needs to be this whole complicated thing. I think just be excited about the books that you're reading. Be openly excited about the books that you're reading or recently read. And hopefully the people around you, while you're doing that, care enough about you to be interested in what is exciting you and ask more questions about it, or, take your recommendation seriously. And, if they don't, well, I don't know, you make your own decisions. You're probably an adult. I don't think, if someone's like, if you're a big reader and your friends aren't readers and there's nothing you can do to sell them on reading the books that you love, keep being their friends. Don't push people out of your life because they don't read. I said this in, I think it was in the comment section when we did our Lonesome Dove episode, because I talked about something about Yellowstone, the show. And someone was like, I can't believe you would watch something so derivative and stupid. I'm not immune to stupid derivative entertainment.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Like,
Yeah, it doesn't have to be your entire media diet, but
right.
Yeah.
Like you know what? The other night, Friday night, I read a little bit of 2666 and I was tired and I had a long week and I didn't want to keep reading. So I put on 30 Rock. Like,
Nice, yeah.
you know, it's okay you don't have to be this like highfalutin, pretentious snob all the time. And apologies to Connor.
Yeah.
I am not trying to accuse you of being one, Connor, but for our audience at large, like, it's okay if your entertainment comes from somewhere other than a book.
Yeah, and
you know, the world sucks. You earned that doom scroll.
Yeah.
You know, watch some stupid reels for an hour. Who cares?
Yeah, actually, I went down a rabbit hole last night of watching influencers that do pranks.
Yeah.
Literally getting punched in the face.
Yeah.
There's a whole page that just reposts pranks gone wrong. It's amazing.
It's great.
Yeah.
You know, no matter how pretentious my literary tastes get, I will never not laugh at a video of someone getting hit in the nuts.
Right.
Yeah. It works on so many levels.
Yeah.
Every time.
The other thing I'll add to that, this is a little bit different, but when it comes to like getting people excited about books, one thing that I think a lot of people who make a bookstagram or a booktube, they do wrong. The one mistake that people make is they make faceless content. And look, if you have some privacy issue, you don't want your face on the internet, that's fine. I understand. But here's the thing. When you post a photo of a book or just a video of the book itself, the only thing the viewer has to go on is that book. And if they don't know what the book is, they're not going to care. If they know what the book is, but they don't like it, they're not going to care. But when you put yourself in the photo or in the video, now people are like, oh, this is a one-off. You're a unique person. There's only one of you. So it gives you an opportunity to, I want to hear what this person has to say because I think that person looks interesting or is attractive or they said something controversial in the first, 2 seconds of the video. Now I want to hear.
Right.
And they said this thing that this book that I hate, they said it's the best book they've ever read. Now I want to hear them justify why they think it's so good. So that is a way for you to expand, reaching people who maybe aren't readers or aren't reading a lot. So, conspiracy theories. Do you have any conspiracy theories that you believe could be true? I'm not a big conspiracy theorist.
I mean, the CIA killed the Kennedys.
Okay.
Flat. I'm going to say it. I don't care. They killed them. The CIA tortured Ted Kaczynski when he was a teenager at Harvard.
That I think I would agree with. Yeah.
And, are at least somewhat responsible for the Unabomber.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I have any conspiracy theories.
I would say that's kind of the CIA is what most of the ones I believe in tie back to.
Yeah.
Is because they're fucking evil.
They don't have a great track record.
No.
If Andy and I get disappeared after this interview, you'll know, or after this episode, you'll know.
Yeah, you might have to find a new podcast partner after this one airs.
Yeah, you'll know who's responsible.
Yeah. I am not suicidal.
Same. Okay. Do you guys? This is from Jack Walter, who's been a long time friend of the channel. Do you guys have any plans on reading more quote unquote classics? And if so, which ones are attracting your attention? I mean, I try to mix them in maybe like once a month. I would love to. I really need to read Grapes of Wrath. It's insane that I haven't read that book.
Wow.
Yeah. And I would like to read Pride and Prejudice.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I'm reading The Count of Monte Cristo right now. Excuse me. God. Which is a classic.
Yep.
I need to read some Dickens, like any Dickens.
Yep.
Other than those, Moby Dick and Ulysses.
Mm-hmm.
But outside of that, like there's really not much pre-World War II
Calling to you, yeah.
that like interests me all that much right now.
Yeah.
And that might change. I might, get hit on the head and want to start reading more old Russians all of a sudden. But currently, like, I'm just interested in stuff that's a little bit more modern. So,
all right, we're going back to Instagram because that was all the YouTube questions. How you doing on time?
do two, three more. I gotta hit the grocery store soon.
Oh boy,
Yeah.
we got a big snowstorm coming in. All right, we'll speed run these. Why is it difficult to DNF a book? That comes from All Work is Art. It's not.
It's not. If you don't like it, put it down.
Yep.
Who gives a shit?
That's right.
Everything's fake. Nothing's real. It's all made up. Read the books you like.
Yep. Paging Dr. Kilby. What color socks are you all wearing? I only wear black socks. Andy?
I'm currently wearing white socks.
Okay. Mixing it up, yin and yang here. Funny I should say that because some Honda L. Rhonda Hubbard. L. Rhonda Hubbard. Okay.
Classic.
Took me a second there. Said, you seem to have an affinity for Japanese novels, as do I. Who should I read? Love Murakami. Actually, I like Asian literature, and Japanese is probably a little bit of a weak spot for me.
Yeah.
Mishima's good. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously was a huge proponent of Marshland by Otohiko Kaga. I think, more people should read that. I've read one Murakami novel in my life, Norwegian Wood, which I really enjoyed at the time. I think that had to do with some other stuff that was going on in my life that, I really connected with the events of the novel. And I, a little over a year or so ago, attempted 1Q84, whatever the hell it is, and I made it 40 pages, and I didn't like it because I kind of think, at least in that novel, Murakami writes like a creep.
All right, there you go. Some of these I'm going to have to skip. Do you have any plans to bring more guests on the show? Yes. This is a good one.
Only if they pay us enough.
Right. Burning My Library asks, what has reading done for you as a person, the positives or negatives, and how was it viewed the way you perceive your relationships with external stimuli?
It's made me a cranky old hermit that thinks he's smarter than everyone else.
I will say that reading has made
I love it.
has made me more empathetic, but also it's made me realize that people are becoming worse and worse communicators. It's made me realize that we are currently experiencing an extreme decline in critical thinking. People's ability to form cogent arguments is almost non-existent at scale at this point.
On a serious note, I'll just echo everything you said because, same.
Yeah. On that regard, probably more negatives than positives, but I still enjoy it.
It's been terrible for my bank account.
Correct. Books by Pierre asks, which episode has been your favorite so far? Which is a good one because we talked about discussing this.
Yeah.
I mean, top three is probably Seth, Ed Park, and Escort David Johnson.
Yeah, I would say the same thing, but I would, you probably, I don't know, maybe
not in that order necessarily.
Yeah,
just
probably kind of rope the Escort and Ed Park interviews as kind of one.
Yeah,
I wouldn't necessarily one episode, but one kind of singular thing, and add in our interview with Chad post. Just to me the fact that we traveled to New York to interview these guys was just so cool.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that's been so fun about doing this podcast, it more or less started as a goof,
right?
I mean, at the end of the day, we are just two idiots hanging out in your kitchen, talking about books, and then out of nowhere, we had conducted interviews with a Pulitzer finalist and a New York Young Lion finalist, and we went from just bullshit about books to sharing hot dogs with an author. That was fun. There's a lot of things that have gone right in my life that I feel like I've fallen bass backwards into. And this podcast is becoming one of them.
Yeah. I'll kind of dovetail off this. Rachel Writes Fiction asks best bookstore experience and or funny bookish anecdote. So the what happened with the interviews with Ed and Esquire, they both lived in New York City at the time. I don't know where Esquire is at the moment. But I was like, okay, we read these two books that just came out this year. I think these guys know each other.
Yeah.
I think we can get them both on the show. And if we can go to New York City and do the interviews in person rather than Zoom, that's way cooler.
Right.
So let's make this happen. Now, if you've ever stayed in a hotel in New York City, you know that they're expensive and they're tiny. And so we have 3 cameras. We're going to have 3 mics set up. We need space for all this stuff. The lighting, because I'm crazy.
We're not small people.
Well, yeah, and I'm crazy. I can't just do it like half-ass.
Right.
It needs to be right. So I booked an Airbnb that was a little bit kind of out of the way. And you know, when you're from somewhere like New Hampshire, you look at things at like distance on a map, but New York City doesn't work that way.
Right.
So I'm like, oh, this is 3 miles from where these guys are kind of located in New York City. And they're like, dude, that's way too far away. Right. So yeah. I'm like trying to find a place that makes sense, that's close enough for them. But obviously the closer you get to like downtown Manhattan, the more expensive everything's getting. And so we're just doing this we're going to do one night. We're going to do an interview on Saturday and an interview on Sunday and then hit the road. And literally the night before we're supposed to drive to New York, the Airbnb host messages me and says, oh, there's an issue with the plumbing and you might not be able to stay there. And I'm going to try to get it sorted before you check in. And I'm like, I'm driving to New York City on a tight schedule.
Yeah, I showed up at your house Saturday morning and walked in the front door and you were like, so don't panic. And I was just like,
yeah. So I actually did not tell Andy or our friend Gunnar who was coming with us I didn't tell Andy until he got here, and I didn't tell Gunnar until we were actually on the road.
I think we were out of New Hampshire.
Yeah, because Gunnar is a very nervous guy. He would have 100% flaked if I told him ahead of time. So we're literally driving and like texting the Airbnb host.
I'm calling hotels.
Yeah, and so I called my friend who owns a few hotels and like knows people, and I was like, maybe he has some connection in New York, whatever. And he's like, hey, what's the deal with this person? Are they like communicating to you through the app or are they like texting? I said, no, they started texting me. And he's like, yeah, they're trying to screw you because the way Airbnb works, if like you cancel, even though the host told you there was an issue, if you're the one that actually cancels the booking, then like you're still on the hook for it.
Yeah.
And when they go off the app and start texting you directly, there's no like chain of communication that Airbnb can just pull up and see.
Right.
So we literally booked another place. I would say we were an hour away from the city when we finally had it locked down.
Something like that. Yeah. Yeah. We were close.
We were very close. But here's the funniest thing. It turns out that there's some questions about the legality of Airbnbs in New York because New York's very expensive. The housing's a problem. So they really don't want people buying properties for short-term rentals. So they'd given us, like the listing had the address on it, but it wasn't the actual address. And the host had said, okay, you're all booked up. Like when you get within this distance, like text this number and then they'll text you the instructions. And I'm like, okay.
Oh, that was
so. Yeah. Andy has my phone and the instructions come through and he's like, oh God. And it's like paragraphs long. And I'm not even kidding, guys. It was like, drive to this street. You'll see
the tree.
You'll find like this oak tree. Look down on the ground. There's this box. The code to the box is this. And then you drive to this other location. It was this big like treasure
The code
hunt.
to the box is the address of the pizza place a block away.
It was literally like a treasure hunt.
Yeah.
But it ended up working out great. It was a great location. We got parking on the street miraculously directly in front of the spot we were staying.
Yeah.
It was super convenient for both authors. Ended up being like a super fun weekend, but that was so stressful.
Yes.
So we will leave. We'll end the episode on that. There's a lot of other great questions, but we just don't have time to get to all of them.
Yeah.
So I will try to answer these directly. So thanks for everyone watching all 50 of these episodes or however many you've watched and kept us going. And as I plugged before, you can join our book club. Link is down below. Anything else you want to say, Andrew?
No.
All right. See you guys next week.
Bye-bye.